Welcome to Imran Star Video, or as we call it, ISVi, the collaborative lens on Vancouver, unfiltered, unscripted, and powered by community. We're not just a voice behind the mic, we're a collective of creators, thinkers, storytellers, and city lovers coming together to spotlight the people, places, and energy that make Vancouver what it is, from coast mountain skylines to neon-lit backstreets. We're covering everything from downtown buzz to the untold stories shaping our scene. You'll find us exclusively on YouTube, no algorithms, no filters, just real talk. For behind the scenes, updates, and chaotic brilliance in real time, follow us on TikTok and Instagram. So hit subscribe, drop a comment, and help us grow from 100 to 10,000 followers and subscribers and beyond. Because this isn't just our platform, it's yours too. Turn it up, get into it. Let's talk Vancouver. This is ISVi. A city woven from many threads, Vancouver is more than a city of mountains, glass towers, and ocean views. It is a city made of people, and those people come from everywhere. From its earliest days as a colonial port to its present-day status as a global metropolis, Vancouver has been shaped by the stories, struggles, and strengths of immigrant communities. Its neighborhoods pulse with the rhythms of multiple languages. Its markets are filled with flavors from every continent, and its identity is stitched together by those who arrived here seeking safety, opportunity, and belonging. This multicultural spirit isn't accidental, it's foundational. Vancouver's growth, both economically and culturally, has always been tied to waves of immigration. Chinese laborers, South Asian farmers, Japanese fishers, Eastern European refugees, Iranian students, Filipino caregivers, Somali families, and countless others have all left their mark, not as guests, but as co-authors of the city's ongoing narrative. Every corner of the city, from the bustling heart of Richmond to the quiet streets of Marple, tells a story of arrival, adaptation, and contribution. But this story is not just about celebration. It's also about complexity. Immigrant communities in Vancouver have faced systemic discrimination, cultural erasure, language barriers, and economic hardship. And yet, they have also built resilience, created thriving communities, and helped define what it means to be Vancouveran in the 21st century. This exploration will trace the evolution of Vancouver's multicultural landscape, from the earliest arrivals to the newest refugee families. From legacy neighborhoods to emerging cultural hubs, it will highlight the individuals, families, and communities who have transformed the city, not only by bringing their cultures, but by reshaping Vancouver's very own. In doing so, it invites us to see multiculturalism not as a backdrop or buzzword, but as the very fabric that holds the city together. Early arrivals and foundational communities. To understand Vancouver's multicultural identity, we must begin with the communities who helped build it, not figuratively, but quite literally. Long before the city was known for luxury condos and global conferences, it was rugged, developing outposts dependent on the labor, resilience, and entrepreneurial spirit of immigrants. These early arrivals didn't just settle in Vancouver, they shaped its infrastructure, economy, and cultural identity in ways that still resonate today. The Chinese community was among the earliest and most critical to Vancouver's foundation, arriving in large numbers during the mid to late 19th century. many Chinese immigrants worked under brutal conditions to construct the Canadian Pacific Railway, the very infrastructure that connected Vancouver to the rest of Canada. Their labor helped transform a remote frontier into a thriving port city, yet the reward was exclusion, segregation, and a head tax that explicitly targeted Chinese immigrants. Despite these hardships, they persevered, and Chinatown was born. What began as a survival-based enclave grew into one of the most vibrant cultural districts in the country, filled with herbal shops, temples, restaurants, and community halls that continue to stand as symbols of endurance and pride. Equally vital was the arrival of South Asian immigrants, primarily Sikhs from Punjab, who began arriving in the early 20th century. Many found work in the lumber mills along the Fraser River and established deep roots in what would become known as Punjabi Market or Little India along Main Street. These communities not only contributed economically, but also laid the groundwork for future generations by building gurudwaras, Sikh temples, establishing the community newspapers, and fighting for the right to vote, a right they were long denied. Their presence in Vancouver is a testament to cultural preservation amid systemic exclusion, and their impact is still deeply felt in the city's spiritual, culinary, and political life. The story of Japanese immigrants is another cornerstone of Vancouver's early history. Settling primarily in the Powell Street area, also known as Japantown, Japanese Canadians became integral to the fishing industry and local commerce. They built schools, businesses, and social institutions, and by the 1930s, they had established one of the city's most cohesive cultural communities. However, during World War II, this thriving neighborhood was ripped apart as Japanese Canadians were forcibly removed, disposed, and interned. While Japantown was never fully restored, its legacy lives on in community festivals like the Powell Street Festival and in the intergenerational memory of injustice and recovery. As Vancouver expanded, so too did its cultural footprint. Thanks to the waves of European immigrants who followed, Italian, Greek, and Portuguese communities settled in areas such as Commercial Drive and Hastings Sunrise, where they opened family-run cafes, built churches, and created tight-knit enclaves that remain vibrant to this day. Their influence is especially visible on the city's culinary traditions, architectural styles, and the deep sense of neighborhood identity that persists in those areas. These foundational communities did more than populate the city, they built its bones. They constructed the infrastructure, raised families amid discrimination, and established the first multicultural blueprints for neighborhoods that would evolve into iconic parts of the city. More importantly, they redefined what it meant to be a Vancouverite. Long before the word multiculturalism entered the national vocabulary. In every brick laid in Chinatown, every chant sung in a gurudwara, and every boat launched from the docks by Japanese fishermen, the early immigrant communities of Vancouver left an imprint not just on the land, but on the city's waves of changes. Identity as well. They didn't just come to Vancouver, they created it, and their legacies continue to anchor the city's present as it reaches for the future. As Vancouver moved beyond the scars of war and industrial hardship, a new era of migration unfolded, one that would permanently reshape the city's cultural rhythm and redefine its sense of belonging. The post-war period, especially from the 1950s through the 1990s, brought successive waves of immigrants whose stories added deeper complexity, color, and vitality to Vancouver's evolving identity. This was no longer a frontier city, it was becoming a global one, and the newcomers who arrived during this time were both responding to global upheaval and seeking local opportunity. Among the most prominent were immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe, many of whom arrived in the aftermath of World War II, fleeing devastated economies, political instability, or communist regimes. Italians, Greeks, Portuguese, and Eastern Europeans helped build homes, schools, roads, and businesses, literally constructing the city's post-war identity from the ground up. Neighborhoods like Commercial Drive, once called Little Italy, Hastings Sunrise, and parts of Kerrisdale became cultural epicenters, brimming with European bakeries, delis, dance halls, and Catholic churches that helped anchor new communities. Their traditions, from bocce games in the park to robust family-run restaurants, still echo through Vancouver's cultural fabric today. But as Vancouver's economy diversified and Canada's immigration policy shifted away from Eurocentric quotas in the 1960s, the city welcomed new global voices. One of the most transformative groups to arrive during this time were Vietnamese refugees, many of whom came as part of Canada's humanitarian response to the Vietnam War in the 1970s and early 1980s. Often referred to as boat people, these individuals and families arrived with few resources, yet built strong, tight-knit communities in areas like East Vancouver and Burnaby. They opened pho restaurants, nail salons, and convenience stores, all while navigating trauma, resettlement. Their resilience added a quiet but powerful layer to the city's immigration narrative, one of survival, adaptation, and cultural pride. Likewise, the Filipino community began to expand rapidly during the 1980s and 1990s, largely through skilled labor and caregiver programs. Many Filipinos arrived under the live-in caregiver program, often working long hours in private homes while supporting families back in the Philippines. Despite their economic contributions, their stories were frequently invisible in the broader cultural narrative. Over time, however, Filipino Vancouverites have gained recognition for the community organizing, artistic expression, and cross-generational resilience, particularly in areas like Joyce Collingwood and Surrey. Perhaps the most economically influential wave came from Hong Kong and Taiwan in the 1980s and 1990s. As uncertainty surrounding the 1997 handover of Hong Kong to China prompted many to seek permanent residency abroad, Vancouver quickly became a preferred destination due to its Pacific Rim geography, stable political climate, and strong education system. With them came not only families, but also massive economic capital, which transformed the city's real estate market, school systems, and consumer culture. Suburbs like Richmond and West Vancouver became hubs for Chinese-speaking families, businesses, and community institutions. Their presence redefined Vancouver's skyline and real estate dynamics, introducing a new level of global interconnectedness and, at times, new social tension. At the same time, the city saw a growing presence of Iranian immigrants, particularly after the Iranian Revolution of 1979. Many settled in North and West Vancouver, bringing with them a rich cultural heritage, entrepreneurial spirit, and emphasis on education. Persian bakeries, bookstores, and Nowruz, Persian New Year, celebrations became part of the city's cultural landscape. Vancouver is now home to one of Canada's largest Iranian populations, and their contributions to business, the arts, and civic life continue to grow. Together, these waves of migration not only diversified the city's appearances, they diversified its values, conversations, and capacity for coexistence. Vancouver was no longer merely a Canadian city with immigrant residents. It was a deeply multicultural city, shaped by migration as a constant, not a moment. The accents in its classrooms, the spices in its markets, and the languages on its buses told stories of global movement and local resilience. Each of these communities, arriving with distinct histories and hopes, helped Vancouver evolve from a predominantly white settler city into a true crossroads of cultures. They built not just neighborhoods, but identity, community centers, places of worship, sports leagues, cultural festivals, and new definitions of what it means to belong. And just as previous generations laid foundations, these post-war and late 20th century communities began framing the house of Vancouver's future, one that would eventually welcome even more diverse newcomers from every continent. Just as one wave of migration begins to settle, another rises. And in Vancouver, the 21st century has brought a new generation of immigrants and emerging communities who are not only adding new threads to the city's multicultural fabric, but weaving entirely new patterns. These are just newcomers seeking a better life. They are nation builders, youth leaders, social innovators, and cultural catalysts who are redefining what it means to grow up, live, and belong in Vancouver today. Perhaps nowhere is this more visible than in the stories of refugees and displaced populations arriving in the 2010s and the 2020s. In response to humanitarian crisis abroad, Vancouver has welcomed Syrian and Afghan families who have brought with them not only hopes for safety, but rich languages, traditions, and community values. While many arrived with few possessions and carried the weight of trauma and war, they have been met, at least in part, with robust community support systems, particularly in places like Surrey, Burnaby, and New Westminster. Through language programs, youth mentorships, and mosque-centered networks, these communities are quietly building roots and revitalizing local neighborhoods. At the same time, Vancouver is witnessing the growth of African and Caribbean communities, many of whom have historically been underrepresented in both population and public discourse. Though smaller in number, these communities are growing in presence, power, and pride. Seen in the rise of African markets, Caribbean dance studios, churches, and advocacy movements centered around Black youth empowerment and anti-racism education. In areas like East Vancouver and South Surrey, second-generation Black Canadians are stepping into the spotlight as artists, educators, entrepreneurs, and changemakers, demanding not only inclusion but representation. Another community rising in visibility and impact is Vancouver's Latin population, often overlooked in broader narratives of immigration. Latin individuals from Mexico, El Salvador, Colombia, Brazil, and beyond are contributing in meaningful ways through the arts, small business, community organizing, and food culture. Events like Carnival del Sol, Spanish language radio, and mutual aid networks have begun to assert land culture as a vital and vibrant presence in the city's identity, especially for youth who straddle languages and cultural influences with ease and innovation. What's particularly powerful about these emerging communities is the rise of second generation and mixed heritage youth who are not simply inheriting their parents' identities but reshaping them. These young Vancouverites are bilingual, bicultural, and digitally fluent, using social media, music, fashion, and education to create hybrid identities that challenge old categories. They are creating podcasts in 3 languages, fusing diaphoric beats with indie sounds, and launching new businesses that are proudly rooted in ancestral knowledge while speaking the language of the future. They are also fiercely engaged in social justice and climate activism, whether organizing walkouts for the indigenous land rights, leading campaigns against systemic racism in schools, or pushing for housing equity and mental health access. This generation is not waiting to be invited to the table, they are redesigning the table itself. And in doing so, they are pushing the city toward a more honest and inclusive vision of multiculturalism, one that centers justice, voice, and lived experience. In the classrooms, on the stages, and across community centers, these new generations are asking tough questions. Who gets to claim space in Vancouver? Whose stories get told? What does belonging look like in a city that markets diversity but still struggles with exclusion? The answers aren't easy, but what's clear is this: the newest communities in Vancouver are not fringe voices. They are the pulse of the future. They are rebuilding neighborhoods, transforming institutions, and keeping the city accountable to the promises of inclusion it so often claims. As Vancouver continues to grow, it is this generation, born in the in-between, that will determine what multiculturalism means, not just in policy, but in practice. And as they rise, they bring with them not just cultural diversity, but new forms of power, leadership, and reimagination that Vancouver desperately needs. Culture, contribution, and belonging. If immigration brought people to Vancouver, it is culture that made them feel at home, and contribution that made them indispensable. Immigrant communities in this city have never been passive participants. They have been active creators, community builders, and cultural architects, enriching every corner of civic life. Their presence is not simply an addition to Vancouver, it is the foundation of what the city has become. Walk through Vancouver's neighborhoods, and the contributions of immigrant communities are undeniable. From the Punjab markets of South Vancouver to the Persian bakeries of the North Shore, from the Vietnamese cafes on Kingsway to Filipino community centers in Joyce Collingwood, immigrant entrepreneurship has kept the city's small business economy alive. These are not just places of commerce, they are cultural landmarks, family legacies, and community hubs where newcomers find their first job, a familiar dish, or a sense of orientation in a new country. But economic contributions only scratch the surface. Immigrant communities are also the cultural heartbeat of Vancouver, infusing the city with language, art, and tradition. Cultural celebrations like Diwali Fest, Greek Day on Broadway, Nowruz, Persian New Year, Chinese New Year, and the Powell Street Festival transform city blocks into vibrant tapestries of music, color, and joy. These events do more than entertain, they affirm identity, preserve tradition, and create a shared sense of belonging across generations and backgrounds. Religious and spiritual contributions are equally significant. Mosques, temples, churches, and gurudwaras serve as anchors of community care and solidarity. They are not only places of worship, but sites of social services, youth mentorship, free meals, refugee resettlement, and elder support. In a city In a city as fast-paced and unaffordable as Vancouver, these spiritual institutions often provide the emotional and practical lifelines that public systems fail to deliver. Crucially, immigrant contributions extend into education, healthcare, and civic leadership. Immigrants and their descendants are doctors, nurses, teachers, transit workers, lawyers, city planners, and frontline advocates. They volunteer in food banks, run school boards, and create community gardens and lead neighborhood associations. They build bridges, literally and metaphorically, connecting policy with people and ensuring that Vancouver is not only diverse in appearance, but inclusive in action. And yet, amidst all this contribution, many immigrants still grapple with the complicated question of belonging. For some, belonging is immediate, found in shared language, local community, or intergenerational resilience. But for others, it is a longer journey shaped by racism, systemic barriers, and the painful contradictions of being welcomed in theory but excluded in practice. The reality is that many immigrant families in Vancouver continue to face wage discrimination, housing insecurity, language barriers, and social invisibility, even as they help keep the city running. This is where the conversation about multiculturalism must evolve. True multiculturalism is not just food, festivals, and fashion. It's equity, representation, and recognition. It means rethinking who is invited into decision making, who is reflected in media and history books, and who has access to opportunity. It means acknowledging that Vancouver's diversity is not just a strength, it's a responsibility. Ultimately, the story of culture, contribution, and belonging is not about charity, it's about reciprocity. Immigrant communities have given, built, and transformed the city, often without being fully seen. Recognizing their contributions is not just a matter of inclusion, it's a matter of truth, justice, and shared future. In celebrating these cultures and communities, Vancouver is not doing anyone a favor. It is, in fact, seeing itself clearly for the first time. Vancouver's identity is a mosaic and a mirror. If Vancouver's streets, storefronts, and festivals reveal anything, it's this. The city is a mosaic, layered, intricate, and composed of countless unique pieces that, together, form something greater than the sum of its parts. But this mosaic is more than a metaphor. It's a lived reality, one that defines how Vancouver looks, sounds, and feels. From the moment you step onto a SkyTrain platform to the instant you walk into a family-run shop in Mount Pleasant or a cultural festival in Surrey. Each tile in this mosaic represents a different community, a different migration story, a different way of knowing and being. Together, they form a beautiful and complex whole, one that has earned Vancouver its global reputation for diversity and inclusivity. But to view the city only as a mosaic is to overlook something deeper, because Vancouver is not just a collection of cultures, it is also a mirror reflecting the tensions, truths, and unfinished business that lie beneath its glossy surface. Multiculturalism in Vancouver is often celebrated, and rightfully so. It's visible in the architecture of Chinatown, the rhythms of Caribbean music festivals, and the interfaith dialogues sparked in community halls. It lives in the cross cultural friendships forged in classrooms and the blended families gathered around shared tables. But while the city promotes a brand of diversity is our strength, the reality is more layered. A mosaic can be admired, a mirror demands that we confront what we see. When we look in the mirror, we see the hard truths, the invisibility of Black and Indigenous voices in mainstream narratives, the persistence of anti Asian racism, and the unequal access to housing, healthcare, and economic opportunity for many immigrant families. We see that the face of the city is changing, but the systems behind it often have not. And yet, it is the very reflection that gives Vancouver the chance to evolve, not by rejecting its contradictions, but by facing them. True multiculturalism is not about optics, it's about ownership. It is about ensuring that the communities who have built, funded, fed, and enriched Vancouver are not only present, but heard, empowered, and centered in its future. It is about confronting tokenism and replacing it with real representation in politics, education, media, and business. This is the dual power of Vancouver's multicultural identity. As a mosaic, it shows us what is possible when cultures coexist with creativity and care. As a mirror, it shows us that the work still needs to be done. It reveals the gaps in the pattern, the missing tiles, the cracked corners, the overlooked stories, and asks us, will we just admire the art or will we repair, include, and complete it? In this way, Vancouver's identity is both an invitation and a challenge. It asks us to honor the communities who come before, welcome those still arriving, and reimagine how we live, lead, and connect, not as separate pieces, but as part of a shared and evolving picture. So whether your family has been here for 5 generations or 5 weeks, your story matters. It is a thread in the tapestry, a voice in the choir, a page in the living narrative of this place, because at its core, Vancouver is not just where we are, it is who we are becoming. Many stories, one cities, and the next chapter we write it together. And just like that, the city's pulse slows, but the story doesn't stop. You've been watching ISVi, Imran Star Video, where voices come together and the city speaks back. We're a crew, not a single face, a movement, not a moment. And every episode that's built with you, for you, by all of us. So remember, subscribe on YouTube, follow us on TikTok and Instagram, drop a comment, drop a like, and let us know how we did today. So until the next drop, stay loud, stay collective, and stay in it. This is ISVi, signing off.